Hey guys, Brockshell here. Back with you with the next video in our series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. I was haunted by the fear that she would, sooner or later, find me out, with the black face and hands, doing the coarsest part of my work, and would exult over me and despise me. Often after dark, when I was pulling the bellows for Joe, and we were singing Old Clem, and when thought how we used to sing it, at Miss Havisham's would seem to show me Estella's face in the fire, with her pretty hair fluttering in the wind, and her eyes scorning me. Often, at such a time I would look towards those panels of black night in the wall, which the wooden windows then were, and would fancy that I saw her dragging her face away, and would believe that she had come at last. After that, when we went into supper, the place and the meal would have a more homely look than ever, and I would feel more ashamed of home than ever in my own ungracious breast. Chapter 15. As I was getting too big for Mr. Wopsle's great aunt's room, my education under that preposterous female terminated. Not only, however, until Biddy had imparted to me everything I knew, from the little catalogue of prices to a comic song she had once brought for a halfpenny, although the only coherent part of the latter piece of literature were the opening lines, when I went to Lunon town, sirs, to rule, law rule. Wasn't I done very brown, sirs? To rule, to rule. Still, in my desire to be wiser, I got this composition by heart, with the uttermost gravity, nor do I recollect that I questioned its merit, except that I thought, as I still do, the amount of to rule somewhat in excess of the poverty. In my hunger for information, I made proposals to Mr. Wopsle to bestow some intellectual crumbs upon me, with which he kindly complied. As it turned out, however, that he only wanted me for a dramatic lay figure, to be contradicted, and embraced, and wept over, and bullied, and clutched, and stabbed, and knocked about in a variety of ways, I soon declined that course of instruction, though not until Mr. Wopsle in his poetic fury had severely mauled me. Whatever I acquired, I tried to impart to Joe. That this statement sounds so well that I cannot in my conscience let it pass unexplained. I wanted to make Joe less ignorant and common, that he might be worthier of my society, and less open to Estella's reproach. The old battery, out on the marshes, was our place of study, and a broken slate and a short piece of slate pencil were our educational implements, to which Joe always added a pipe of tobacco. I never knew Joe to remember anything from one Sunday to another, or to acquire under my tuition any piece of information whatever. Yet he would smoke his pipe at the battery with a far more sagacious air than anywhere else, even with a learned air, as if he considered himself to be advancing immensely. Dear fellow, I hope he did. It was pleasant and quiet, out there with the sails on the river passing beyond the earthwork, and sometimes, when the tide was low, looking as if they belonged to sunken ships that were still sailing on at the bottom of the water. Whenever I watched the vessels standing out to sea with their white sails spread, I somehow thought of Miss Havisham and Estella, and whenever the light struck aslant afar off, upon a cloud or sail, or green hillside or water line, it was just the same. Miss Havisham and Estella, and the strange house, and the strange life appeared to have something to do with everything that was picturesque. One Sunday, when Joe, greatly enjoying his pipe, had so plumed himself on being most awful dull, that I had given him up for the day, I lay on the earthwork for some time with my chin on my hand, descrying traces of Miss Havisham and Estella all over the prospect, in the sky and in the water, until at last I resolved to mention a thought concerning them that had been much in my head. "Joe," said I, "don't you think I ought to make Miss Havisham a visit?" "Well, Pip," returned Joe, slowly considering. What for? What for, Joe? What is any visit made for? There's some visits, perhaps, said Joe, as forever remains open to the question, Pip. But in regard to visiting Miss Havisham, she might think you wanted something, expected something of her. Don't you think I might say that I did not, Joe? You might, old chap, said Joe, and she might credit it. Similarly, she might not. Joe felt, as I did, that he had made a point there, and he pulled hard at his pipe to keep himself from weakening it by repetition. You see, Pip, Joe pursued, as soon as he was past that danger, Miss Havisham done the handsome thing by you. When Miss Havisham done the handsome thing by you, she called me back to say to me as that were all. Yes, Joe, I heard her. All, Joe repeated, very emphatically. Yes, Joe, I tell you, I heard her. Which, I mean to say, Pip, it might be that her meaning were, make a end of it, as you was. Me to the north and you to the south, keep in sunders. I had thought of that too, and it was very far from comforting to me to find that he had thought of it, for it seemed to render it more probable. But, Joe! Yes, old chap. Here am I, getting on in the first year of my time, and since the day of my being bound, I have never thanked Miss Havisham, or asked after her, or shown that I remembered her. That's true, Pip, and unless you was to turn her out a set of shoes all four round, and which I mean to say, as even a set of shoes all four round might not be acceptable as a present, in a total vacancy of hoofs. I don't mean that sort of remembrance, Joe. I don't mean a present. But Joe had got the idea of a present in his head, and must harp upon it. Or even, said he, if you was helped to knocking her up a new chain for the front door, or say a gross or two of shark-headed screws for general use, or some light fancy article, such as a toasting fork, when she took her muffins, or a gridiron, when she took a spat, such like. I don't mean any present at all, Joe, I interposed. Well, said Joe, still harping on it, as I had particularly pressed it. If I was yourself, Pip, I wouldn't. No, I would not. For what's a door chain when she's got one always up? And shark-headers is open to misrepresentations. And if it was a toasting fork, you'd go into brass and do yourself no credit. And the uncommonest workman can't show himself uncommon in a gridiron, for a gridiron is a gridiron, said Joe, steadfastly impressing it upon me, as if he were endeavouring to rouse me from a fixed delusion. And you may aim at what you like, but a gridiron it will come out, either by your leave or again your leave, and you can't help yourself. My dear Joe, I cried in desperation, taking hold of his coat, don't go in that way. I never thought of making Miss Havisham any present. No, Pip, Joe assented, as if he had been contending for that all along. And what I say to you is, you are right, Pip. Yes, Joe, but what I wanted to say was that as we are rather slack just now, if you would give me a half-holiday tomorrow, I think I would go up to town and make a call on Miss Havisham, which her name, said Joe, gravely, ain't Estavisham, Pip, unless she have been rechristened. I know, Joe, I know. It was a slip of mine. What do you think of it, Joe? In brief, Joe thought, if I thought well of it, he thought well of it. But he was particular in stipulating that if I were not received with cordiality, or if I were not encouraged to repeat my visit as a visit which had no ulterior object, but was simply one of gratitude for a favor received, then this experimental trip should have no successor. By these conditions I promised to abide. Now Joe, a journeyman at weekly wages whose name was Orlick, Now Joe kept a journeyman at weekly wages whose name was Orlick. He pretended that his Christian name was Dolge, a clear impossibility, but he was a fellow of that obstinate disposition that I believe him to have been the prey of no delusion in this particular, but wilfully to have imposed that name upon the village as an affront to its understanding. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care. And thanks again.